A year ago, in the middle of a bitter November cold snap in Boise, Idaho, I was house-sitting for my sister while she and her husband vacationed in Maui. Around 8:40 p.m., the power on their entire block went out. No warning. 1 second, everything was humming heater. Lights. Frigid, the next. Silence. The twins, 8-year-old boys, were already asleep upstairs. I lit a few candles, pulled up their baby monitor on my phone, and figured I'd ride it out. That's when I heard it. A low, constant rumble, coming from the woods behind the house. At first, I thought it was a neighbor's generator, but when I looked out the window, every house nearby was dark. No lights, no humming. Still, the sound was steady coming from deep in the trail that cuts through the trees. Then, at 9:11 p.m., someone knocked on the front door. Just once. Sharp. I peeked through the peephole. A man in filthy overalls stood there, holding a toolbox. No badge, no logo, no flashlight. Just standing in the dark like he belonged there. "Evening, ma'am," he said. "Restoring backup power. Mind if I check your exterior breaker?" I told him no. He didn't argue, just nodded and walked calmly around the side of the house. The backyard motion light never came on. At 9:17, the baby monitor crackled. I checked the app. One of the twins' beds was empty. I ran upstairs, shard in my throat, but both boys were safe. Still asleep. Back downstairs, I noticed something else. The generator noise? Louder now. Closer. Then, all the lights flickered back on. But something was off. The microwave blinked. 3:19. The kitchen clock said 12 o'clock, and the back door was locked. But wet footprints giant unastract through the house, leading from the basement door to the hallway, and then disappeared. I called the police. They found a Honda generator running silently behind the trees wired into the house through a cleanly drilled hole under the back deck. Inside the toolbox the man had carried bolt cutters, a scanner tuned to emergency frequencies, and a notepad with 5 addresses. Ours was third. No prints, no face, no trace. But in the kids' room, tucked near the window, they found a single red thread caught in the sill. Neither of the twins owned anything red. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat between their beds with a kitchen knife in my lap and waited for the sun to come up. 2 winters ago, during a brutal ice storm in downtown Denver, I stayed late at work. The building was nearly empty by the time I left. It was just after 6:30 p.m. when I stepped into the elevator, headed for my car on level P4 of the underground garage. As the doors opened, the entire garage was black. Not dim, not flickering, just gone. No lights, no backup generators, just cold, thick darkness, and a single red exit sign glowing from the far wall. I turned on my phone flashlight and stepped into the silence. My boots echoed louder than they should have on wet concrete. I told myself the storm must have knocked out the grid. I didn't know yet. I wasn't alone. I reached my silver sedan, hit the key fob, no beep. The power was completely dead. I got in manually, locked the doors, and tried the ignition. Nothing. Then, in my rearview mirror, I saw movement. A shape. Not close, not moving, just standing maybe 10 cars back. Too far to see clearly, but close enough to know it hadn't been there before. I turned the flashlight toward the mirror. Nothing. The space was empty. Maybe I imagined it. I turned back. He was right in front of my windshield. Black coat, soaked, hood up, face hidden. One gloved hand at his side, the other holding something long, thin. Not a flashlight, not a tool I recognized. He didn't move. He didn't knock. He just stared, watching. I panicked, climbed over the center console and flung open the passenger door. My boots hit the concrete hard. I ran. I sprinted toward the red exit sign and shoved the stairwell door open. The alarm didn't go off, no power. My breathing echoed through the stairwell as I climbed. Fast, slipping. My flashlight flickered once. Then I heard it. The stairwell door below opened, and someone followed. Not fast, just steady, slow footsteps, one by one. No talking, no calling out, just steps that kept getting closer. I hit the lobby level and shoved the fire door open. This one triggered a faint whine. I ran into the pitch-black lobby, scanning for anyone. Phones? Dead. Security? Gone. Outside, across the street, a police cruiser sat with its lights flashing blue on the icy sidewalk. I ran, waving both arms. An officer brought me into the cruiser, wrapped me in a blanket. I told him everything, man, in the garage. No power, no ignition. Someone chasing me. His partner went to check. Came back 10 minutes later. The garage was empty. My car door was open. My phone was still on the seat. No one else was there, and no footprints but mine. They checked the building's elevator log. My access card had activated P4 at 6:32, but another master keyone assigned to janitorial staff had triggered the level just before me. No janitor had clocked in. No one was supposed to be there. I don't park in underground garages anymore, especially not alone. They say it was just a glitch in the system, but sometimes, on stormy nights, a red trail of wet footprints appears on level P4, leading from a parked car to the stairwell. Last November, I was alone on night shift at a remote water control station north of town. Just me, a silent building, and the massive steel water tower outside. At 3:12 a.m., every light in the station died. The pumps went silent. The emergency generator didn't kick in. No backup systems. And through the front window, under the moonlight, I saw a man standing by the tower valve wearing white coveralls and a breathing mask, perfectly still, watching. He looked familiar. I checked the generator bay. The diesel line had been cleanly cut. Tools were left behind. Someone knew exactly what to sabotage. Inside, the phones were dead. Radios silent. The chemical control screen had one manual override. Someone was tampering with the chlorine feed. Suddenly, a voice outside said, calm and clear, "You can't stop what's already started." I opened the front door, and standing there was my old supervisor, Darren Leaf. Only Darren died in a car fire 3 months ago, and this wasn't someone who looked like him. It was him. Same burn scar, same eyes. He stepped closer. "You were supposed to approve the final override, but you signed off before it was ready. I made one mistake. I tried to run, but the exit door had been sealed from outside with wire. The air grew thick. A sharp, chemical tang filled the room like over-chlorinated water. Then the alarm screamed. A full system breach. Chlorine levels maxed out. I smashed a window with the fire axe and crawled out, gasping into the night. Inside, the monitors flickered one last image. Darren standing in the pump room, smiling at the camera. Then the screens all went dark. Emergency crews shut down the tower. The override had spiked the chlorine to dangerous levels. But there were no tracks, no broken locks, no digital intrusion, just bolt cutters, a severed fuel line, and the override code still logged under Darren's name. They called it a security failure, human error, but no one explained the footage. And no one believed me when I said the screen flashed one last message before it cut out. Water remembers.
It was one of those nights when the office felt suffocatingly still. I was on the night shift, completely alone, with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft buzz of the old ventilation system as my only companions. It wasn't my first time working late, but something about that particular evening felt off. I remember it clearly because it was a Friday. Everyone else had left hours ago, and I was left behind to finish up a critical report for Monday's meeting. The office was located on the outskirts of town, tucked away in a nearly abandoned industrial complex. Nothing but empty parking lots and warehouses surrounded us, and on nights like this, that isolation felt palpable. By 11 p.m., I had become hyper-aware of every tiny noise. The clacking of my keyboard was sharp and almost too loud, echoing off the walls in the open workspace. Occasionally, I'd hear a creak, a pop from the old building settling, I told myself. Still, my eyes kept darting to the dark corners of the office where the light didn't reach. Around midnight, the air changed. I can't explain it fully, but the office, which had been comfortably warm, suddenly felt cold. Goosebumps prickled my arms, and I caught myself glancing at the thermostat across the room. It read the usual temperature, but that icy feeling lingered. That's when I first noticed it. A slight rustling sound, like fabric brushing against something. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was enough to freeze me in place. I muted my music, strained to listen, but the office had gone silent again. I shook it off. Maybe it was just the wind outside, or a draft I hadn't noticed. I got back to work, determined to finish and leave, but then it happened again. This time louder, closer. I stood up, hesitating, but curiosity got the better of me. I stepped out into the hallway, the sound still fresh in my mind. My footsteps echoed as I walked toward the back storage room where the sound seemed to come from. The door was slightly ajar. I felt the urge to turn around, to leave, but something compelled me forward. I pushed the door open wider. The room was dark, save for the sliver of light coming from the hallway behind me. Shelves lined the walls, filled with unused office equipment and forgotten paperwork. But what caught my attention was a single chair, placed awkwardly in the middle of the room, facing the door. It wasn't there before. I know it wasn't there. I've been in and out of that room a dozen times. No one had been in the office but me. The chair sat there, motionless, like it had been waiting for me. I backed out slowly, trying to keep my breathing steady. My brain was scrambling for an explanation, but nothing logical was coming up. Back at my desk, I tried to collect myself. It was probably some leftover from the cleaners or someone moving things around earlier. I was letting my imagination get the better of me. I checked my watch, just past 1 a.m. One more hour and I'd be done. But then I heard it again. That same sound. A soft rustling. Only this time, it was behind me. Directly behind me. I didn't want to turn around. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to stay still. But I did. Slowly, I pivoted in my chair, and my heart nearly stopped. The chair from the storage room was now in the hallway, facing me. I couldn't breathe. My mouth was dry, my heart pounding in my ears. There was no way it moved on its own. I stood up, backing away slowly, never taking my eyes off it. Every instinct told me to leave. But then, a shadow flickered in my peripheral vision, down the hall by the break room. I wasn't alone. Someone was in the building. I grabbed my phone and dialed security. My hands shook as I explained the situation, trying to sound calm, but failing miserably. The guard told me to stay put. They'd be there in 5 minutes. 5 minutes felt like an eternity. I moved to the farthest corner of the room, facing the hallway, phone still in my hand, heart thundering in my chest. I kept staring at the chair, waiting for something, anything to happen. But nothing did. The security team arrived and swept the building. They didn't find anyone, and there were no signs of forced entry. I must have looked crazy trying to explain the chair, the noises, the cold. But they reassured me it was probably just a prank or my imagination running wild after a long day. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me that night. As I grabbed my things to leave, I glanced back one last time. The chair was gone.
I've always considered myself a rational person. I don't scare easily, and I've never been the type to believe in superstitions. But something happened to me last year that I can't explain, and it still haunts me in ways I never thought possible. It started with a new job. I'd been hired by a tech company in a small town I'd never heard of before. The place was out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by forests and hills, and while the town itself was quaint and charming, it was clear the company was the only real industry in the area. The job was great, good pay, nice people, challenging work. But there was something off about the office. It was in an old industrial building that had been converted into a modern workspace, all open floor plans and exposed brick. The building was huge, much bigger than what the company needed, so entire floors were empty, and there were hallways that led to nowhere. I didn't think much of it at first, but as time went on, I started noticing small things. My computer would crash at the same time every day, exactly 3:13 p.m. The lights in the break room would flicker when I walked in, but only for me, never when anyone else was around. And then there was the cold. I'd be sitting at my desk, and suddenly the temperature would drop, not just by a little, but to the point where I could see my breath in the air. It would last for a few minutes, and then everything would go back to normal. I asked around, but no one else seemed to notice anything strange. They laughed it off, said it was just an old building, probably with bad wiring and a lousy heating system. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One evening, I had to stay late to finish up a project. By the time I looked up from my screen, it was after 10 p.m. and the office was empty. I packed up my things, shut down my computer, and headed for the elevator. The office was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses in on you, making every little sound seem amplified. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. The light above it blinked, but the doors didn't open. I waited a few seconds, then pressed it again. Same thing. Nothing. I turned to take the stairs instead. The stairwell was narrow and poorly lit, with that same unsettling quiet. I'd taken these stairs dozens of times before, but tonight they felt different. Each step echoed unnervingly, and my footsteps seemed to lag slightly behind, as if there was someone just out of sync with me, following at a distance. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself I was being ridiculous. But as I reached the second floor landing, I heard something that made me stop cold. It was a soft sound, almost like a whisper, coming from the direction of the empty floor. It wasn't words, just a low, continuous murmur, like someone talking to themselves. I stood there, straining to hear. The sound grew louder, but no clearer, more like a droning hum than speech. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but something kept me rooted in place. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, listening to that sound. Finally, I forced myself to move. I rushed down the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last, as if the air itself was thickening around me. By the time I reached the ground floor, I was almost running, desperate to get out of the building. The moment I pushed through the front doors and into the night air, the tension snapped, and I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I didn't stop until I was in my car, doors locked, engine running. I didn't mention the incident to anyone the next day, but I couldn't get it out of my mind. That night, I decided to do some digging, see if there was anything in the building's history that could explain what I'd experienced. It took a while, but I finally found something, a mention in an old newspaper article. The building had once been a factory, long before it was converted into offices. There had been an accident, a fire that broke out in the middle of the night, trapping several workers inside. They never made it out. The article was brief, almost dismissive, but it included a detail that sent a chill down my spine. The fire had been traced to faulty wiring in an elevator shaft, and the time it was reported? 3:13 a.m. After that, I couldn't stay in that building. I found another job, made up some excuse about needing a change, and left the town for good. But even now, every time I hear a whisper or feel an unexpected chill, I can't help but wonder if something followed me from that place, something that hasn't quite let go.
It started as a simple road trip, something I did every few months. I had taken a job that involved driving across state lines, delivering supplies to remote towns that didn't have much in the way of convenience. It paid well, and I didn't mind the solitude. I had gotten used to the quiet hum of the engine, the winding roads, the endless fields, and the occasional radio static that filled the gaps when the stations faded out. But this time felt different from the start. The route I took was new. GPS had suggested a shortcut, and I, feeling adventurous or maybe just careless, decided to follow it. The sun was setting behind me, casting long shadows across the two-lane road that seemed to stretch forever into the dusky horizon. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour, not uncommon for these parts, but still, there was an emptiness to this stretch of road that was hard to ignore. I noticed the first sign about 15 miles in. Barlow, 30 miles. I had never heard of Barlow, and it wasn't on my map. I dismissed it as a small dot of a town, not worth the ink. But as the minutes ticked by, I felt a twinge of unease. I couldn't pinpoint why. Maybe it was the way the road felt, like it was leading me further and further away from civilization, twisting through a landscape that grew more desolate by the mile. Trees began to crowd the edges of the road, tall and dark, their branches gnarled like they were reaching out to snag anyone passing through. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Then my phone lost service. No bars, no GPS, nothing. That was more than an inconvenience. Out here, it was a problem. I slowed the car down, scanning the sides of the road for any sign of life, a gas station, a farmhouse, even a mailbox. But there was nothing. Just that thick, creeping line of trees, closing in tighter and tighter. About 20 minutes later, I saw another sign. Barlow, 30 miles. I frowned, glanced at the clock. That wasn't right. I should have covered at least half that distance by now. I felt a prickle of irritation, or maybe it was fear. I shook it off and kept driving. Maybe the signs were old, outdated. But then I saw another one. Barlow, 30 miles. The exact same sign. I knew it had to be the same because it had a rusted corner, a bullet hole through the O. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles going white. I told myself it was just coincidence, but I felt something heavy settle in my chest. The road ahead was darker now, the trees closing in like a tunnel. I turned on my headlights, and they cut two sharp beams into the night, but they didn't seem to reach far. The darkness seemed thicker somehow. I drove on, ignoring the nagging voice in my head telling me to turn back. How could I? I didn't even know where back was. After what felt like an hour, but could have been less, time felt strange out there. I saw it again. The same sign. Barlow, 30 miles. Same rusted corner, same bullet hole. My heart pounded now, hard and fast. I pulled over, stopping the car. I needed to think. I stepped out, and the quiet was immediate, like a blanket smothering all sound. No wind, no distant hum of insects, nothing. Just the crunch of gravel under my boots. I walked over to the sign, touched it, felt the cool metal under my fingers. It was real. As real as I was standing there, and yet I couldn't make sense of it. I looked up and down the road, but it just stretched out into the blackness, endless and empty. I got back in my car, breathing hard. I decided to turn around. Screw the shortcut, screw the schedule. I just needed to get out of there. I made a U-turn and headed back the way I came. I drove for what felt like an eternity, but the landscape didn't change. The trees, the darkness, it all looked the same. I checked the clock, and my heart skipped a beat. It hadn't changed. Not a single minute had passed. I glanced at my phone. Dead. I felt a bead of sweat roll down my temple. I checked the fuel gauge, half a tank left. Enough to get back if I was quick. I kept driving, and then I saw it again. Barlow, 30 miles. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. I couldn't deny it anymore. This wasn't a mistake. The road wasn't letting me leave. I swallowed, feeling my throat tighten. I had read stories like this, heard urban legends about endless roads and loops that trap you forever, but I never believed them. Not really. Not until now. I pushed on, refusing to give in to the panic gnawing at me. I tried to stay focused, kept my eyes on the road, telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe I had hit a patch of road that circled back on itself. Maybe there was some trick to the light, some illusion I couldn't figure out. Then I saw a figure standing on the side of the road, just at the edge of my headlights. My breath caught in my throat. It was a man, or at least I thought it was. He was tall, with a shadowed face, wearing what looked like a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat. He just stood there, unmoving, watching me. I slowed down, squinting to see him better, and my instincts screamed at me to keep going. I don't know why, but something about the way he stood, so still, so calm, made my skin crawl. I sped up, drove past him, trying not to look back.
But in my rearview mirror, I swear I saw him step onto the road, starting to follow. I drove faster, heart pounding, adrenaline pumping. The trees seemed to blur together in a dark mass, the road stretching ahead, endless. I kept glancing back, but the figure was gone.
I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding, but then there was another sign. Barlow, 30 miles. I shouted in frustration, slammed my hands against the wheel. It was like the road was alive, playing a sick game with me. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I just wanted to be anywhere but here. Then I saw something up ahead, a flickering light. A small, old-fashioned gas station, like something out of a forgotten era. I hadn't seen it before, I was sure of it. I pulled in, the tires crunching on the gravel, and cut the engine. The lights flickered, buzzing, but the place looked abandoned. The windows were dark, the pumps ancient and rusted. I hesitated but got out of the car. I needed help. I needed answers.
I approached the door, my heart hammering in my chest, and reached for the handle. I could touch it. I heard it. Faint, almost a whisper, carried on the still air. A soft, low humming, like someone singing a lullaby. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I turned slowly, looking around, but there was no one there. Just the dark trees and the endless road behind me.
Then, in the dim light of the gas station, I saw it again, the figure with the wide-brimmed hat. Closer now, standing just beyond the pumps, still as stone. I backed away, heart racing, got into my car, and slammed the door. I turned the key, praying it would start. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of there, tires screeching. I didn't stop driving, not until the sun began to rise, and the trees began to thin out. Eventually, I saw another sign, Highway 47 to 2 miles. Relief washed over me, and I sped up, not daring to look back. I finally made it to a small town, and I collapsed at a diner, babbling my story to anyone who would listen. Some of them nodded, a few even looked sympathetic, but most just stared at me like I was crazy. I don't blame them. I think I was crazy too. But I know what I saw, what I felt on that road. I've never gone back that way again. And every now and then, when I'm driving alone at night, I'll glance at the GPS, just to make sure I'm not headed back to Barlow. because I know it's still out there, waiting.